Manx Radio.
Substantial sport, but at this time of the year, obviously a lot of trophies coming to fruition. So thanks, Ed, for that. We're going in now to the Mannin line section of present politics. Peter actually sent us an email saying, you're confusing your listeners going from one topic to another. Could you slow down a bit, please? We do have to cover quite a bit of ground because a month in politics does cover an awful lot of ground. I hope I'm not going too quickly. I will take your comments under consideration, Peter. Thanks for letting me have them. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your comments, and we want to possibly hear you on the telephone as well. But please keep everything, as you know, this rigmarole, legal, honest, decent and truthful. Call 66 13 68. Text 166177 or email studio@manxradio.com. Just before we get stuck into this second half, let me just tell you who's around the table with me. And I'm glad to say all my guests have stayed on. Tim Baker, Ayre and Michael, the MHK. Andy Cowie, just stepped down as chairman of Ramsey Commissioners, but anxious to get back in the fray if he can, but then that's all back to his commissioners who will vote on who they want as chairman. And Rob Callister, the MHK for Onchan, also in the Department for Enterprise, with responsibility in particular towards tourism. Just before we go on to specific things, we had a guest over on the island who I had the privilege to speak to. She's a lovely lady. Her name's Kessia Purik. She's the Speaker of the Northern Territories in Australia. They have about 25 members there, so it's roughly the same size as our House of Keys. I asked her what differences she'd spotted watching the Keys question time, and she said one obvious one.
Question times in Australia, the crossbenchers or the opposition, when they field questions, the government doesn't know the content, as opposed to here is the government obviously knows the content and they've been vetted, so to speak. So government in Australia, or in my jurisdiction, they can be caught on the hop, and that's part of opposition and crossbenchers' job, is to hold the government to account. You know, how are they spending their money? Where's the policy direction coming from? What are they doing about X, Y, Z? So that tends to make it more robust.
Let's just quickly go to Rob Callister. Is that a good idea?
Yeah, I think it potentially is, but I think we have a great system in the Isle of Man already. I mean, yes, the Minister and the Chief Minister have an idea of what direction we're taking with our question, but they certainly don't have any idea where the supplementary questions
They do tend to read out just statements, which could actually be passed to the member, I think, before.
They do read out, and a lot of the time, myself personally, I ask most of my questions via email. I don't know how many thousands of emails I've asked, but there is sometimes when I want to publicly highlight something, or there's something I want to put in the public domain, or I want to put the Minister under pressure on a particular topic, I'll ask a question on the floor of Keys or in Tynwald. So in my eyes, I think we have the best of both systems. He has an idea of which direction we're taking, but then he doesn't know the supplementary part.
Tim Baker.
Yeah, I think there's a sort of slightly broader point that I'd like to make on this, that actually we're very quick on the island to look at how other people are doing it and thinking, well, they must be getting it right, that must be better than what we're doing. Actually, I think we've got a pretty good system. I've been involved in the function of Tynwald process, the post-list vein exercise, and when you actually step back from it and look at it in a considered way, we've actually got some real strengths of our system, and I would advocate that we work out what's right for the Isle of Man and we stick to it. I think, I don't know the detail of the particular parliament in Australia that the Speaker was referring to, but she talked about opposition and government. Here we've got effectively more of a consensus style, and yes, clearly we have a council of ministers and we have backbenchers, but we're all pretty much independents. I know Liberal Mannin and Manx Labour Party do exist, but fundamentally we're an independent house, and I think the dynamics need to reflect that.
Just move on at the risk of going too quickly, Peter, listener. We are moving from subject to subject, but I just want to give this one to Mr. Cowie, Andy Cowie. It's a short question. What about the rundown properties, Mr. Cowie? Do you know what he's referring to?
Not specifically. There are one or two properties in Ramsey that could do with some attention. We have a project ongoing at the moment where we've identified the properties that we think perhaps could do with a little bit of improvement to enhance the town, and we're in the process of writing to some of the property owners and asking if they could maybe make some steps to...
What powers do you have?
We do have some quite serious powers in terms of derelict properties. We can move in and demolish them. Obviously it's not something that we would take lightly, and there's a very long process before we would take that into action, but we would rather work on some more of a consensus approach and try and encourage owners to enhance their properties to improve the town and therefore the value and benefits of their own ownership.
Well, this comes from Dave. He's either Dave Onchan, which is an unusual name, or Dave from Onchan, which I think is more likely. Talking about dilapidated sites, all MHK's MLCs and Douglas councillors should hang their heads in shame over the state of the former Aquadrome and Summerland site. Until such time it is sold or developed, possibly a long time, greater efforts should be made to cover the remnants of the buildings, to improve the look of the site, and most importantly, out of respect for those who lost their lives there and their families. Rob Callister, as far as tourism is concerned, it's not a great sight when tourists go along there to catch the MER, to see that in the background.
It's not a great site, but we've got a few of those, but we are turning the corner. There's some fantastic developments coming online over the next few years. Lord Street, which is what Tim has already mentioned. We've got Mount Murray coming on site. It's another. It's been.
I went to see that. How far off it? Because there wasn't anyone working on it yesterday.
Hopefully, it'll be coming
a
online.
long way, isn't it?
It'll be coming online soon, and it is a fantastic facility.
It's a long way from completion.
I think it'll be coming online this year, and I think it's going to be a fantastic facility. It will raise the standard of our holiday accommodation on the Isle of Man. To get back to the Summerland site, it is an incredibly difficult site to develop. You've got property sitting behind it, so realistically,
Who fear that any work in front might
and that's what I'm saying.
them.
It's incredibly complex. So it's one of those sites. But this goes back to what we were saying previously. If we take Chester Street car park there, and the site that's just been closed down, what I desperately don't want to see is that site not being utilised again for many years. We've got to turn these properties around, turn these sites around, and actually develop them. And I think if we take the Victoria Prison is another thing, we knocked that down without actually considering what we should be building on there. And when government is actually starting to knock these things down and say, right, it's no longer needed, we're going to knock it down, they should have a plan to what to replace it with.
I think they could put some model sheep there, life size, and so have them grazing, because it's a field up there. Have you been up there? It's just a pleasant field.
That's not going to really benefit the economy in any way, John, to stick a couple of plastic sheep there. Come on.
It would look better, wouldn't it? Perhaps, Tim Baker, the idea of the government perhaps doing something to make these sites look better.
Well, I think the crucial thing, and I would agree with those comments about the Summerland site, I think that it does look dreadful. But what I've seen, certainly in the last 18 months, is a more progressive attitude towards disposing of some of these sites. So my understanding previously has been that these sites have sat on the market, and there's been a quite high value aspiration around what financial return might be generated from either selling or leasing them off. Now, particularly with the commitment around considering social value, which incidentally came at about the time the courthouse issue was bounced around a year or so ago. When disposing of sites now, there's much more of a holistic approach being taken. I know for a fact that the Lord Street development has been based very much on that, and government looking in the round at what value and benefit to the island.
That's with planning at the moment, isn't it?
It's not reached. There may be plan application in. It's in the planning process. I think I'm not sure exactly where it's at. But
it's on track, though. It's going ahead.
Absolutely. It's a private sector development on land which is being released by DOI, and I think the same sort of mindset is being followed with places like the Summerland site. And I understand that there are some meaningful discussions going on around Summerland at the moment with potential interested parties.
I just wonder if the government could have a word with the people who own the AXA site. In there, it is just a building site. It's covered with weeds. They've got some little grills you can look through. Why you'd want to look through there? Because it's awful. They might even cover the grills up. Could the government not say to the people who own it, we will even contribute a bit to make it look a bit better? It's right in the heart of Douglas.
Well, I would agree. And the crucial thing is private developers will do what suit private developers. So there's only two ways that you can actually get them to do what might be in the greater good. One is actually compel them, and Andy talked about some of the powers that exist, and or secondly, the other way is to encourage them. And I think this committee that Bill Shimmons has brought forward with quite a tight timescale to report.
This is the Brownfield sites.
The Brownfield sites. I think that those are the sort of issues that I think Bill has got in mind should be being debated by that committee.
We're going to return to Ramsey in a minute, but first, this.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
This is the Man in Line. John Moss in the chair. My guests. Let's go from right to left for a change. Tim Baker and Andy Cowie, former chairman of Ramsey Commissioners, and Rob Callister, touring representative in the Department for Enterprise. Just quickly from Edith, this is on Ramsey again about the coaches. I'm afraid, Mr. Cowie, coaches in Ramsey drop off very poor and a long queue. Visitors get very bad impression. Can't wait to get back on the coach. Hear them complaining, from Edith. So there's an area which quite a few people have weighed in on. So I suppose there must be a problem there.
It's two people, to be fair, John. But it's obviously very disappointing to hear that. It's not something that as many comments we get. People criticising the coach drop off. I'd say Market Square's just been regenerated. It's a much more attractive proposition, and it's a very short walk into the courthouse area in Parliament Street, which is.
Could you have someone, a sort of blue badge guide, sort of hanging around, talking to people, welcoming them?
It might be something that's worth looking into if there is genuinely a problem there.
Sorry, Mr. Baker.
Yeah, I was just going to say to stand up for Ramsey on this one. I mean, I've had a lot of comments made to me about how positive the development of Ramsey's been over the last few years, and I think the commissioners have really been at the heart of that. And I think in what you've got in Ramsey is you've got the commissioners working with local businesses and wider community groups to actually take things forward. So nothing's perfect, and there are some there are some areas for improvement, but it's a work in progress. And I think, certainly other areas of the island look very positively at what Ramsey have achieved over the last few years.
Let's go to Stephen. Good afternoon, Stephen. You've got three comments, three topics. You best keep them fairly short, I suppose. The first one, the Castle Mona.
Good afternoon, John, and good afternoon, panel. The first topic is, I think the Castle Mona was mentioned. Now, it has been spoken about round the island that there is restrictions on the sale of this, covenants, not to be used as a hotel. Is this true? Does the panel have any idea? If it is a covenant and restricted, surely this would restrict the ability of a purchaser to do what they wanted, and this is really dictating planning policies. That's me first.
Well, let's just deal with that first of all. Rob Callister, it was a hotel, obviously. Have you heard anything in this regard?
No, I've definitely not heard anything that says there's restrictions or caveats, other than the fact that it's a listed building. There's obviously some criteria they'll have to comply with. But personally, with regard to tourism, yeah, I'd love to see it back being used as a hotel. But as you say, that it's going to need a lot of money spending on it to reach that sort of level again. Stephen,
tourism, the general topic, is your second question.
Well, my general topic comes next. Tourism is an associated one that morphs into the next one. So I did hear Rob say that in comparison with our other island, Jersey, not our island, but another island, Jersey, where they spend far more than we do. And I'd like to hear the comments from the panel is, have we set our face really against tourism? And we think that the future lies rosier with an increased population and all its incumbent issues that would be rolled into that. Would we get a better return if we spent and advertised with more money? And should the department, should you, Rob, be asking for more money to get this better return?
Let's move that to Rob Callister.
Yeah, I can answer that. Good afternoon, Stephen. Well, going back only several years, the Isle of Man got over £1.4 million to market the Isle of Man as a tourist destination. Unfortunately, that now has dropped by almost £1 million. I am making sort of ways of asking for more money with Treasury. As I've mentioned in the first part of the programme, there was some political members who said that we should be taking money out of motorsport and putting it into general tourism, and we're looking at that. But realistically, what we need is additional money if we are going to market the Isle of Man successfully going forward in the future.
Stephen, do you want to comment? Quick comment on the end of that?
No, I think that Rob has answered the question excellently. We do need more money spent if we're going to improve the commodity. Now, my last question is, and I know this was mentioned by most of the panel. They all spoke about the problems with ShopRite, for example, closing, and there's other problems around the island in our local economy. In fact, the Policy and Reform Minister has spoken of our internal problems, and the former Chief Minister always used to speak about the twin-track economy. Now, I think there was a investigation started some time ago, and it's called the Local Economy Investigation. And I'd like to be could anybody tell me when can we expect this investigation to report? And I think it will uncover all the things such as salaries, wages, wage increases, the problems of our local economy. And if we had this report done, it may show some of the problems that local operators in retail and others have got.
We've got a few blank faces around the table. What was it called again? Local
economy investigation. It was an investigation started, I think, by the former Department for Enterprise. So I just wonder, when can we expect that?
Oh, well, let's go to someone in that department. Rob Callister, have you heard of this?
No, I haven't, unfortunately, John. But if Stephen has a link, obviously we know each other well. If he wants to send me a link to it, I'll certainly investigate it. But as I again mentioned in the first half, if you're actually charging rent of over £60,000 for a small unit in Strand Street, and then on top you've got utility costs which are far higher than the UK, plus you've got rent rates, of quite high. How are we going to ever promote businesses into the main Strand Street? And it's something that needs a wider discussion with government, local authorities, and the retailers themselves.
Mr. Baker, just quickly, have you heard of this report?
I haven't. Obviously, it is an area that I would expect the Department for Enterprise to be on top of. There's no doubt that the caller's comments are correct. We do have very much a split economy, and the issues and the dynamics are different between them. And government policy needs to speak to both of those. We need to be facilitating the growth of the e-gaming and some of those other sectors that are pretty vibrant, where the challenges are different, but equally the more domestic focused, particularly hospitality, leisure and retail, needs to be supported as well. We need to be able to do both.
We had to leave you, Stephen. Thanks very much for your contribution. Let's go to Charles Lewin. Mr. Lewin, hello.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Yeah, deep water berths. We'll have to move to a break in a minute, so it'll have to be fairly short.
Okay, well, first of all, to Rob, I think Rob is setting the example to all the other MHKs on the island. He's on his website, he's available, you can communicate with him. A shining example of how an MHK should be. But the question is, the Deepwater report was not in Rob's hands, but was in his office last July. We're now here, and there's no decision. And reading in Rob's blog the other day, he said a couple of years. So really, when is a decision going to be made with regard to the Deepwater berth report, and can we have a copy of the Deloitte report?
Thanks for that. I think that was included in the £80 million scheme, wasn't it, that came before Tim or Mr. Baker?
Yeah, it was, John. The decision that's been made is in terms of the overall harvest strategy, which had, from memory, about eight different components. And in relation to the Deepwater berth, the very clear direction of travel is to use the Victoria Pier and to deepen that, to make that capable of hosting these bigger cruise vessels. Now, that is a significant investment, but is a proportionate investment for the cruise ship business, which is growing, but it's still fairly small at this point on the island. So, Minister Harmer brought forward the harbour strategy, which was supported by Lawrence Skelly on behalf of the Department for Enterprise, and that's the direction of travel.
So
each of those individual elements will be brought forward for approval through the normal TIMWAL process.
Just a quick comment, Mr. Lewin.
Just when will that happen?
Well, I think it's happened already, has it not? Isn't it not in progress? Sorry, Rob Callister.
Good afternoon, Buster. When we spoke originally, I think it was even late last year, the report wasn't in the public domain. And obviously there was still at a very early initial stage, and I'd seen rough copies, or we say, or draft copies. The document now is in the public domain, and I'll find it and put it on my site. But it definitely is, and it gives all the proposals and a copy of the report. So I'll do that this afternoon. We've just talked about the cruise industry there, John, and we've got a fabulous ship visiting our island today. It's a growing sector. As you say, next year we're going to have around 24 cruise ships visiting our island, over 9,900 passengers. That's going to increase dramatically in 2008-19, when we're going to have over 37 cruise ships visiting our shores.
Well, can I just ask you the question? Those people coming off a ship, how much are they going to spend out there when they get into the island?
Well,
What's the average spend?
We know the average is approximately around £45 pounds
Per
per
head.
passenger. The average in the cruise industry is around €70 per person.
Is that justified in building a berth for a cruise line of that sort of
that
income?
needs a wider discussion. As I say, personally, I feel that we should be going for quality cruise passengers and maybe not going for quantity. It's a wider discussion. It needs careful consideration. And working in the department, it's part of the department is leading the way on this along with DOI. So I think we've just got to take it carefully. But I'm still in favour of the deep water berth at this moment.
Let me go to Mr. Baker.
Yeah, I mean, the key point about this is that the harbour strategy was exactly what it says on the tin, a harbour strategy, not a deep water berth strategy. The deep water berth is part of that, and we have a choice of doing three things. We either do nothing, we do what we're doing, or we go much bigger and bolder, as some were advocating. The much bigger and bolder would have a very, very challenging payback on that. Doing nothing would effectively be ignoring the issue and the opportunity. What you've got here is a considered piece of investment which will allow us to prove the market. It's not going to be wasted. You know, you can have something tangible, something of substance, which will stay with us, and it will give us an opportunity to see how we can develop the cruise market on the island. If further investment is required subsequently, then we've got much more of a proven business case.
Right, John is on the line. We're going to you in just a moment, John, but first we do have to take one of these. You're listening to Mannin Line, and we are swamped with emails and callers at the moment, so we'll try and get through as many as possible. John is waiting to talk about Ramsey. Just before we go to that, can I just read this? Ramsey, where does Mr. Cowie live? Andy Cowie is one of our guests, obviously. My other guests, Rob Callister as well, and Tim Baker. The town strewn with cigarette ends, dog eggs, whatever dog eggs are, and takeaway wrappers. And as for his comment on the success of degeneration scheme, has he not seen the already crumbling paving and numerous potholes? There are, it has to be said, faults in there, is there?
There's one or two minor faults developed in the regeneration area, which has been in place for a couple of years now, but there's no major issue there. We've been in contact with the DOI, and they are in the process.
I suppose the
of
fact
analysing those and repairing them.
It is the shop front, as far as Ramsey's concerned, that area. It
Yeah.
needs to be looked after, and if anything happens, it needs to be looked at pretty quickly, doesn't it?
Yes, very much. A comment about cigarette ends and dog eggs. On a weekend morning, yes, there may be some cigarette butts around. We have taken steps to raise the issue with any public houses where this is a problem, and they have a responsibility to tidy those up. And we've also purchased a new mini sweeper which does regular tours of the town and cleans those up. So whilst there might be a problem at very short periods of time, they do get cleaned up very quickly.
It'd be nice if people actually dealt with their dog ends. I think that must be what it is, dog ends and cigarette ends, without actually having something else to do it. John is joining us. John, hello. Ramsey, you have a problem with Ramsey, do you, at the moment? Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm phoning all the way from Port Erin, where I'm a member of the meet and greet team at the railway station. So we'll meet a lot of visitors off the trains and off coaches. And when we ask them, what did you like Ramsey? The usual response is, there's nothing there. The vast majority of visitors never find Murag Park. The coaches park in the wrong place, and certainly if there's any signing, it's certainly not adequate to Murag Park. There's also a lack of street maps. Now, in contrast, down in Port Erin, the Port Erin traders produce some brilliant street maps of the village, so that visitors have no excuse for getting lost. But unfortunately, the Department of Tourism, who used to produce pads of brilliant street maps of the towns of the island and a road map of the island, which we issued free, they've stopped issuing those, and they've produced some very arty road maps, street maps, which quite frankly aren't legible.
Let's just move on to Mr. Cowie. You're wincing there, so some of this is striking home.
Thanks very much for your comments, John. I don't know how recent these observations were, but within the last 6 months, we have put up some brand new town maps which show the town, and I think 6 of those.
This was recent, was it, was it John?
Mainly last summer, but we're getting some feedback.
Last summer, right? Okay.
Well, thank you. I think we've addressed that, and there's certainly one of those maps right next to the coach stop. And I'm conscious people do use it, and they look at it. There's often little clusters of people observing the map, and deciding where to go. Obviously, it's something we strive to improve at all times, but we have made some improvements there already.
It's good to get these calls, John, because it draws the attention of people to it. Yeah.
When we're speaking to visitors, if they're going back to Douglas on the train, they'll say, "Where's such a place in Douglas?" And there are no decent, free street maps of Douglas available. Now, the Department for Tourism used to produce these. We've spoken to them to say, can you continue to produce them? But they said, oh no, what we produce now, these arty maps, have been well received. Quite frankly, they're not well received. They're very amateurish.
Let's move that on to Rob Callister, who's listening with interest to this. Mr. Callister.
Good afternoon, John. I'll pick this up from the department's point of view, and I'll ask for that to be reviewed. So I'll do that this afternoon. I'll send a quick email to the team asking them just to consider what sort of maps we put in the public domain going forward.
Yeah, but some of the brochures you produce, the accommodation guide, the big A4 accommodation guide, from memory, there's nothing in there telling potential visitors where the Isle of Man is. This is in the middle of the Irish Sea. There's a full page on air services to the island, but it doesn't tell you which UK airports you can fly from to get to the Isle of Man. And the steam packet has a full page advert inside the front cover, and it doesn't tell you which ports they sail from. You know, who exactly you're aiming this publicity at?
I think your points are striking home, Mr. Callister.
Yeah, I'll pick all of those points up and I'll review them, and hopefully, if you want to contact me with your personal details, I'll make sure we get a response for you this week.
John, thanks very much indeed for your comments. Obviously, they will be dealt with. Let's see. We'll be interested to hear from you in future if you feel they are being dealt with as well. Okay. That's John on the line. Thank you very much for his comments. We've got so many emails coming in. Let me just get through a few. Mr. Baker was concerned about extra staffing for the meat plant. If all the production went through, well, this was provided before. Isn't it the government policy at the moment to encourage more people here? That's sort of left in the air, that question. I'm sorry about that. Can you see a question there, Mr. Baker?
I guess they were picking up on my comments about scaling up capacity through the meat plant. I mean, clearly that's a management issue, and it's not directly linked to the population or visitor numbers. It's about what happens to our animals and the routes to market we have. I mean, the vast majority, particularly of our lamb, is always going to have to be exported either in carcass form or live, because we produce more lamb than we eat on the island.
Let me just go down some of these emails because we've got an awful lot of them. You can dress up the Isle of Man as much as you want, but it's simply down to cost, hence young population leaving the island. It's fast becoming a retirement home. Let me just move that on a bit so I can read it. Mr. Callister, I was looking at the cruise ship at the harbour this morning. Promenade looks in a desolate rundown state. Hardly any shops are open, but they're coming ashore. Are we even being responsible, encouraging them to berth here while the island looks so sad?
Well, unfortunately, we've got to go through a little bit of a pain whilst we address our front window, should we say, but I'm hopefully at the end of it, it'll be worth it. I still think the Isle of Man, people berth in Douglas, but then they go off to some of the fabulous places, which, to be fair, where they come from, they've probably not seen anything like it. So we shouldn't put ourselves down. We've got some amazing facilities, we've got some amazing attractions, and we've got some amazing places to visit. So Douglas is the gateway, but people leave the gateway and then go across the island. So, yeah, we're going to have to go through a little bit of pain whilst we're fixing the prom, but after it, I think the benefits will be there for all to see.
Someone says via Facebook they've been in touch with you. There's a huge motorhome market growing by 12% each year. The Isle of Man government non-friendly to this market, but why the prison or Glenside would make a great motorhome park.
Agreed, and I've picked that up as well. But on the flip side of that, as an MHK, I'm forever getting emails from people saying that their streets are completely clogged with motorhomes taking up all the residential parking. So it's not an easy problem to solve. So I take on board those comments.
Does Rob really have any influence to get more money from government for tourism? And another question, how much public money does the meat plant receive per year? It's about 1,300,000, isn't it? Something like that, Mr. Baker?
That's about the right figure for last year, yeah.
Well, what about yourself? Can you go to the government and say, give me more money, we need it?
I think I've already said that in a couple of supplementary questions in the House of Keys and in Tynwald. I feel that if the government is genuine about marketing the island, because it's going to become more and more difficult, I think the government may have to invest more money in our tourism sector. I'm sorry, but that's the reality.
May I make a suggestion? The local artist Jimmy Duggan, now he's the one that did that mural on the wall opposite the Market Hall, the old Market Hall, who already has street art on the island, do a paint job at the Summerland site. Possibly his spray-painted birds, maybe one for each of the lives lost in that site, just a thought. Or at least cover it with camouflage nets. Camouflage nets, now there's an idea. Rob Callister, do you think they could cover the Summerland site with a big camouflage net? Or even that bit on the going up the wall face?
I'm not convinced, John. I think we've got, as you say, this is our gateway. We've got people passing it. I think what we've got to do is find a solution for that site and to develop it as soon as possible. You know, even if it's a case that we put a car park in there and some access route into Douglas, we need something on that site.
But you've seen across the world some artists who are able to take sites and paint on them and make them look extraordinary. Couldn't you not let loose some artists on the Summerland
Well,
site?
let me just say that, John. Somebody contacted me about 3 or 4 weeks ago about saying that it's so nice to come to an island which doesn't have any graffiti. I know artists,
I don't mean graffiti. I mean designs,
I know.
etc.
But realistically, there's some beautiful ones in Douglas as well, and they are beautiful to see. One person's pictures, another person's graffiti, and what they said to us, it was so nice to come to an island, come to a place where there was none of that.
Well, something you could do there is, I've heard of Bosco Verticale, in which the skyscrapers have grass, trees, and actually planted on the various bits of it. You could actually do that on the Summerland site, on the bits sticking out, put plants and things like that, and actually make it look like a sort of almost like a forest up there. That's just me thinking off the top of my head, which I'm not here to do, really. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to work down a couple of these questions. Does the panel think it's fair that some people can pay ridiculously low rates, which obviously uses the services provided by large local authorities, which are paid for by the ratepayers of the larger authorities? Any thoughts on that? Anyone? Rates? People paying lower rates?
Well, rates reform is a big topic. We could do a whole phone in and discussion on that.
Just a quick one though for you, Andy Cowie, because you dipped away.
I agree fully with Tim there. The rate system does need to be reformed quite significantly. I mean, for something which affects so many people, well, everybody in Ireland really, to be based on a 1974 valuation system is clearly not fit for purpose, and some steps need to be taken on that.
Just one, before we go to the last break, it's less than 4 weeks till the TT competitors start to arrive to prepare for the races, yet still nothing's been done to the lower paddock, which is designated to be their home, Rob Callister. When are you going to take a look at this?
We are looking at it. We've had a lot of conversations about how we improve the paddock facilities. We've got to remember that we're only the tenants of that property, of that land, so we're having to speak to
But it's a fair point, isn't it? Just 4 weeks to go.
We are desperately working hard to improve all the facilities in and around the grandstand, the paddock. The team within the motorsport team have worked tirelessly over the last 12 months to improve the quality of offering, not just for the riders but also
it
for
doesn't seem to be showing at the moment. Nothing's been actually done physically.
I would just wait and see, John. We are working, but there's a bigger picture to happen about how we improve the facilities up there, how we put some tarmac down, how we put extra light down.
It's going to happen in the next 4 weeks.
How we're going to put electricity in there. All of these facilities need improvement, but unfortunately, they're going to take a long time. We're not saying
longer than 4 weeks.
Probably more than 4 weeks, yes. But we are working towards a goal of improving those facilities for the riders, but also for the spectators. The good news is that we're increasing the number of events that we have for TT. I think if the weather is with us, I think we're going to have 2 fantastic weeks. I think the Isleman's going to showcase what it does best.
Excellent. We'll have to leave it there because I've got a break to go to.
Manx Radio.
We're nearly at the end of the programme. A lot of people I haven't been able to get to. Thank you very much for your contributions. We have been covering as many as possible. Just want to mention this. There's a big rumour that Sefton have put restrictions on the sale of the Castle Mona, that it does not reopen as a hotel. First of all, Mr. Baker, have you heard that? And they're allowed to?
Well, I haven't heard it other than through the conversation we've just had, but it's a private property. They're a private owner. They can sell it to whom they like for what price that they can get for it. Now, the more restrictions a vendor puts on a property, the lower the price they're going to get. It's up to them to bring it forward and to sell it. We know that the sale price
it's dropped to $750,000,
something
now,
like that.
Yeah.
It's not a significant portion of the overall cost that a buyer is going to have to invest in the site. But that's really, it's not a government matter. It's a matter for the Sefton.
This comment, probably our last, making Victoria appear deeper will also bring in other ships, not just cruise liners, e.g. offshore wind farm construction, project cargoes, anything. It sounds they're saying it could actually open the way.
So the harbour strategy envisaged those opportunities. And what we're basically saying is we're investing in our harbours. We need to do some maintenance investment anyway, and whilst we're doing it as part of a coherent plan, we're going to effectively expand by taking these opportunities.
Well, thank you very much to my guests who have been around the table today and have fielded so many different topics. We do cover a lot of topics on this programme, for which I don't apologise. I think we trying to get through as many as possible. Rob Callister, the member of the Department of Enterprise and Tourism, and particularly his responsibility. Andy Cowie, who we may yet again see as chairman of Ramsey Commissioners. I don't know, he's just stepped down it for this time. And Tim Baker, Ayre and MHK. And in particular, you out there who have contributed mightily to the programme. Thanks very much for taking part. But now, at the end of the Mannin Line, good afternoon from myself, John Moss. It's 2:00.
No.